Can we fully clean the oceans? Chapter 1. The question at the waterline. At daybreak, the sea looks innocent. The light comes slowly, turning the horizon into a thin silver crescent, and then, gently, a band of rose. Waves feather the shoreline. A heron lifts its legs, hinge by hinge, through the mirror of the shallows. If you arrived here with no memory and only your eyes, you would swear the ocean is clean. The surface lies. It always has. The ocean is a master of concealments and dispersals. It absorbs, dissolves, churns, buries, devours, and when all else fails, spreads. Can we fully clean the oceans? To answer that honestly, we have to begin at this waterline, at the edge where human promises meet physical law. The ocean is not a lake we can drain and scrub. It is a moving, layered, living engine that wraps a planet, braided with currents that reroute heat, rains, and lives. Cleaning it is not like tidying a room. It is like changing the air in the sky, possible in parts, influential in whole, never finished, and never under perfect human control. But impossibility, too, is a word the sea often softens. The question is not if we can do anything, but what we can do completely, what we can do enough, and what we must do now to tilt inevitabilities in our favor. The scale we don't see. Imagine every river in the world as a conveyor belt feeding the sea. On those belts, soil and silt, yes, but also tire dust, cigarette filters, confetti-sized plastics, fibers you shed from your clothes, scrapings from brake pads, fertilizers, rogue droplets of oil, shards of paint, residues of pharmaceuticals, and the ghosts of our conveniences, wrappers, sachets, straws, and strings. Some rivers carry a trickle of trash, others are rapids. A few, infamously, are fire hoses of debris during monsoon peaks, discharging more plastic into the ocean in a single week than a small nation generates in a year. That is the volumetric truth. But the other part of the truth is subtle. The sea is big, and things that enter it dissolve into fractions of themselves. A plastic bottle fragments. The fragments fracture. Sunlight oxidizes. Waves shear. A year later, those pieces are so small they pass through your fingers with the sand, lodge in plankton guts, fall like snow into submarine canyons, and spool into the tissues of mussels that taste of brine and sky, and a few billionths of something that was once a soda in a summer you can just barely recall. Fully clean is a phrase that stumbles at this threshold. Fully is absolute. Oceans are not. Even in their healthiest ages, oceans were full of the wreckage of life, molts, bones, dissolved shells, shards of old reefs. Fullness is natural. What's unnatural is our new layer of residue. The problem isn't that the sea holds things. It is that we have given it a cargo it cannot process on human timescales. Even if you could skim every visible bottle, bag, and fishnet from the surface gyres, you'd still be left with the halo of the unseeable. Microplastics at different depths, nanoplastics below our current detection thresholds, soluble chemicals that ride along the conveyor belts of circulation, and particulate films spread across the ocean's skin, the microlayer where phytoplankton breathe and where the first exchange of light and gas writes the script of climate. Fully clean, in that context, cannot mean pristine, like it never happened. The clock does not reverse, but it can mean cleaner every year than the last, and then clean enough that harm dwindles, and then so well managed that future damage is dwarfed by natural repair. To accept that is not surrender, it is adulthood. It is the courage to set endpoints that physics respects. Where the trash lives. If you ask someone to close their eyes and picture ocean trash, they will likely imagine a floating landfill, a dense island of debris that you could photograph from space. But the reality is distributed. The great subtropical gyres, North Pacific, South Pacific, North Atlantic, South Atlantic, Indian Ocean, do collect floating waste into whirlpools of plastic confetti, with rafts and tangles appearing where winds and currents conspire. Vessels there can slip through stretches where the horizon is flecked with floating fragments. Nets snag, skimmers fill. But even in these famous patches, the density can vary by orders of magnitude within a day. The sea is always unmaking the picture. Elsewhere, the trash sinks. Fishing lines grow heavy with algae, then slip under. Microplastics, clothed in biofilms, lose buoyancy and descend like dust into storied marine snow, the slow blizzard that feeds the deep. On the seafloor, a new archaeology accumulates. Canning lids in submarine canyons, a rope in a kilometer of darkness, shards of plastic cups embedded into sediments that may become, in 1,000,000 years, a thin technofossil band in future rock. Beaches become sorting machines, cycling items with each tide until bottle caps lodge in bird burrows and foam wedges in driftwood cathedrals. Then there are the hotspots that don't look like hotspots. Storm drains with no filters, industrial outfalls where microbeads and fibers roll out in their billions, coastal fishery hubs where ghost nets lost or abandoned continue fishing with ruthless patience, snaring and strangling until they break and drift and snare again. The hotspots are both grand and humble. To fully clean in any serious sense, the hotspots are everything, because oceans move and multiply what we miss. What clean would mean, perhaps we should rename the goal. Not fully clean, but fully accountable. That would mean stop the inflow fast. If you can close the tap at the sink rather than mop the floor forever, you close the tap. That means river barriers that are smart and humane. They must protect fish and boats and floods, trash capture in stormwater systems, and waste management that works in towns that have grown faster than their trucks and landfills. It means deposit return systems for bottles and cans. It means the sachet economy, cheap, single-use packets, must evolve into refill systems that protect the poor, not just in price, but in dignity. It means manufacturers who place plastic into the world are responsible for its return. Extended producer responsibility must become a norm, not a novelty. Hunt the ghosts. Even if we changed packaging overnight, those nets would still strangle. We need buyback programs for derelict gear, incentives to mark and retrieve it, biodegradable alternatives that fall apart if lost, and GPS-tagged floats that tell us if the line is cut. We need divers paid to recover old traps, and we need to cheer them like firefighters, because that is what they are. Remove what we can, where it matters. This is the work of booms, skimmers, conveyor belt boats, drone barges, beach teams, and trash wheels with toothy grins that chew the river's offerings before tides do. It is the work of using currents against themselves, placing capture devices where flows converge, not where they scatter. It is prying plastic from mangroves at low tide and sifting storm rack after a cyclone when the geomorphology of a coast offers up a year's trouvailles in a day. It is slow. It is necessary. Heal the chemistry. Cleaning is not only about solids, it is also about the invisible. That means upgrading wastewater plants to strip microfibers and microplastics with finer filters and biological polishing steps. It means trapping tire dust and brake wear powder with better road designs. It means green roofs, bioswales, and storm basins that filter runoff like kidneys. It means turning farms into partners, less fertilizer to prevent dead zones, more buffers of reed and willow to sponge nutrients before they sprint into estuaries. Design out the problem upstream. Your washing machine and your wardrobe are ocean technologies, whether you know it or not. Fit the machine with a microfiber filter. Knit the fabric with fewer shedding fibers. Revolutionize adhesives and inks so that labels, films, and glues dissolve cleanly when washed in a recycling plant instead of shattering into smaller betrayals in the surf. Every product is a lever on a beach. Measure truthfully. To clean is to count. Sensors on buoys, satellites teasing spectral hints of surface films, ferry routes equipped with intake filters that sample the water column under normal operations. Citizen science that is not a photo op but a genuine part of the evidence. We cannot manage what we cannot admit. Does the ocean help? We are not alone in this. The ocean cooperates in its rough way. Microbes learn to digest what we spill. Sunlight cooks polymers. Beaches act like colanders. Seaweed farms can draw down nutrients that would otherwise feed algal blooms. Oyster reefs can filter water, polishing clarity with valet grace. Mangroves and salt marshes trap debris in their roots, become living nets that keep trash from the next bay. Of course, this kind of help has limits, and sometimes it looks like harm. When a mangrove is full of plastic, it chokes. When oysters filter, they bioaccumulate. Nature will help us, but only if we roust ourselves to reciprocate. The physics that say, not fully. We should be blunt about the barriers. Diffusion is relentless. The ocean is layered like a cake, mixed at the surface by wind, stratified below by temperature and salinity, with currents that can keep slabs of water separate for seasons or years. Trying to capture every microplastic across those layers would demand energy we do not possess without causing more harm than good. Any net that fine is a net that filters life. Any vacuum that strong is a storm. A perfect clean would be a perfect removal of plankton, larvae, eggs, and the small all to pluck dust from a cathedral. We will not do that. We must not do that. Chemistry also keeps our hubris in check. Certain pollutants dissolve or adsorb onto sediments, traveling where our skimmers cannot go. Oil we can boom and burn and disperse, but the aromatic residuum lingers in marsh mud, working its way through benthic biographies long after cameras have left. We can accelerate recovery with microbes and clever materials, but sections of the chronicle will still be written in slow ink, and time will not give us back the lost decades. Even if we froze the present, it would take generations for deep-sea accumulations to be buried under layers of clean sediment. Fully is a word that needs a calendar it cannot have. The psychology of a possible yes. So why not retreat to a smaller ambition? Because cleaning the oceans is not one project. It is 100,000 projects that form a change in the species. The closest we can get to fully is not technological, it is cultural. It is the verb tense we choose. Right now, the default tense is future passive. It will be cleaned. We outsource it to the idea of a they, some organization, some engineer, some fleet. The new tense must be present active. We clean. In cities, on rivers, at harbors, in factories, in wardrobes, in the budgets of finance ministries, and the design reviews of startups. This is not a poetics of blame. It is a grammar of belonging. Belonging matters because the ocean has always been edited by those who belong to it. Fishermen have forever read its moods and moved their nets accordingly. Sailors have learned its languages of wave and wind. Surfers memorize the breath of sandbars. The cleanup fleet we need will look like all of that local people with intimate maps, plus the best of engineering, bound by policy that rewards what works and retires what doesn't. Stories from the water. You want proof? Walk the port of a city that has installed a row of small, hungry bins that sip surface trash with quiet straws. They are not dramatic. They do not perform for social media. But emptying them has become a new job, a dockworker's additional rhythm, which means a paycheck, which means pride. On a river, a wheel with cartoon eyes munches bottles and branches and sends the rest of the city a daily tally. Kids vote to name it. They roll their parents' carts to the deposit return machines and discover, perhaps, their first brush with systems thinking, that a bottle and a coin can share a circuit. On a windswept estuary, a crew in a flat-bottomed boat navigates through a necklace of booms to collect plastic that would have been tomorrow's gull's stomach. They log GPS points where the booms clog. Next season, the team shifts a segment upstream by 30 yards and doubles their catch, because the current curls around a pier with the stubbornness of a habit. Elsewhere, a diver in green water fingers the knot of a ghost net that has wrapped itself around a coral head, stabs a lift bag, and watches the net rise like a myth you can actually rewrite. These are small history-making acts, micro-civilizations of care, not romantic, just right. There is a temptation to romanticize the cleanup as a hero's quest, one big ship, one big net, one big moment. But the tempo that lasts is municipal. It thrives in budgets and standard operating procedures. It is boring in the most blessed way. When you repair a storm drain with an insert that filters, no one applauds. But in 1,000 places, over 1,000 rains, an ocean is spared 1,000 small pains. That is how planets turn. In aggregate, not in epiphany. We should also be precise about harm. Plastics are not poison in the cinematic sense. They are architecture. They serve as new surfaces for microbes, as false food for sea turtles, as interior scaffolding that turns a whale's intestine into a museum of lighters and rope. Their toxicity is often downwind, the additives that leach, the persistent organic pollutants that ride their surfaces. Think, too, of the boat propeller snarled by a bag, the pump clogged on a fish farm, the mangrove sapling strangled at birth. The damage is everywhere but rarely spectacular. Cleaning, therefore, must be everywhere and rarely spectacular. The work that changes the world rarely takes a bow. What success will look like? Picture a future shoreline, 10 years from now. Dawn again. The horizon is still silver. That is the ocean's promise to the eye. But at your feet, the rack line tells a better story. There are still sticks and pods and cuttle bones. There are a few fragments of blue and white, but fewer than last year and fewer each year. The locals have stories. The weekend cleanup groups that became a permanent crew paid by the port. The textile factory that switched to low-shed yarn. The city council that quietly revised its building code to require stormwater inserts. The fisheries co-op that gets a bonus for returned nets. The grocery that replaced sachets with refill stations people actually like using. The beach is not Eden. It is a civilization that has chosen to align. At sea, a trawler passes, and its wake leaves nothing but foam. Its gear is tagged. If it's lost, it calls for help. The nearby river has a barrier that pivots for fish, lifts for boats, and opens for a flood. A teenager, curious, opinionated, checks her town's trash wheel statistics like sports scores. A ferry's intake filter quietly gathers data and particles, and the lab across the bay publishes those data in a way that lets anyone judge progress, or the lack of it, without euphemism. This is what fully clean becomes, once the dream grows up, not absolute sterility, but a living, self-correcting system in which harm is shrinking and repair is accelerating. A world where the ocean is not asked to be a landfill or a literal sink for our sins, but is allowed to return to its oldest work, moving heat, feeding clouds, and training our minds on the horizon. The edge of honesty, still, an honest book will say it again plainly. We will not remove every microplastic from the midwater column or the abyss. We will not unwind every chemical bond of every additive scattered across the global ocean. We will not unscramble every egg we've scrambled. But we can starve the problem until it is no longer a crisis, until the graphs of harm slope downward and stay that way. We can push the balance into an era where whales strand from old causes, not new plastics, where coral reefs die from old enemies like heat, not new ones like fishing line tourniquets, where coastal villagers talk about storms and luck and fish, not about a rope that decapitated their outboard on the only day they could afford fuel. In that world, if a child asks, "Is the ocean clean?" we will answer, "Cleaner than it was when I was your age, cleaner next year, and you can help keep it that way." That answer is not defeat, it is lineage. What we will need. We will need money, of course, but money guided by metrics, not vibes. We will need engineers who love barnacles as much as algorithms, people who design for fouling and failure and still produce devices that do not become trash themselves. We will need artists and marketers to make, refill, cool, and repair proud. We will need laws that flip incentives so clearly that every boardroom that makes packaging treats retrieval as part of the product design, not an afterthought in a CSR deck. We will need rural roads designed with grit traps, laundries fitted with fiber catchers, tire companies that finally stop shrugging at the mass of rubber dust they send into the world. We will need to treat coastal communities not as cleanup crews of last resort, but as co-authors. Pay them, equip them, listen to them. In Manila or Mombasa, in Baltimore or Bali, their knowledge of which corner floods and which tide rips is the difference between devices that work and devices that become YouTube and then fail. And we will need patience of the salty kind. Sailors know there is no straight line on the water. You tack, you adjust to the wind you have, not the wind you wanted. Then, in a way that always feels like luck, though it is often skill, you find yourself making a passage, the meaning of fully reclaimed. When we say fully clean, we can reclaim the word by shifting its object, not fully clean oceans, but fully clean hands, hands that accept responsibility up and down the chain of cause and effect, hands that design and vote and buy and build, hands that pull a net off a reef, hands that unscrew a storm drain, slide in the insert, and screw it back. Hands that grab a broom on a Tuesday morning because the tide ran high last night and left a bitter belt of foam cups, and who feel as they sweep not bitterness but competence. We cannot promise the ocean a return to some pre-human stillness. We can promise it this: we will stop wounding you on purpose. We will start healing you on purpose, and we will make the healing boring, stable, and permanent. That, in the anthropology of empires and flotsam, is what maturity looks like. In the next chapter, we will leave the shoreline and board a working plan. We will map the operations, where to place barriers, and how to keep them from becoming fish killers. How to design river capture that pays for itself, what municipal codes change first and why, how to convert an industry from single-use to refill without punishing the poor, what technologies are promising and which are placebos, how to build proof loops metrics that invite public trust instead of propaganda. We will assemble a field manual for a decade of credible action, because oceans do not respond to adjectives. They respond to pressure, momentum, and time. And time, like the tide, is moving even as you read. For now, stand at the waterline. The ocean looks as it did in your childhood, silver, wide, unreadable. It is both wounded and immortal. It is bigger than your heartbreak and strong enough to reflect your better choices. Can we fully clean it? We can fully choose to be the kind of species that does not dirty it on purpose, that cleans where it can, that commits to the long work where it can't. And if that sounds like less than the fantasy, less than the viral video of a miracle machine, remember this. The sea has never been impressed by spectacle. It is impressed by cycles. It is impressed by tides. It will be impressed by us when our cleanup becomes one more tide that never stops. Chapter 2. The Work at Sea and Shore. The ocean does not need our poetry. It needs our plan. So let us lift the plan like a chart on a captain's table, smooth the creases, weight the corners with mugs of coffee, and begin tracing routes with a pencil that still smells faintly of cedar. The operating picture. Before anyone touches a net or drafts an ordinance, we need a shared map of the problem that ordinary people, engineers, and mayors can understand at a glance. Picture a living atlas, blue for water, green for shore, and a constellation of amber dots for leakage points, storm drains without filters, unlined dumps within 2 kilometers of a river, informal settlements whose waste has nowhere to go but downhill in the rain, fishery wharves where broken rope collects like a second tide. The atlas updates daily. It draws on satellite cues, spectral signatures of floating films, ferry intakes that sample microplastics as they cross their routes, acoustic sensors on bridge pylons that listen to the hushed rattle of trash against steel after storms, and citizen photographs geotagged to show where rack lines turn suspiciously synthetic. We do not publish shame, we publish possibility. Dots that turn from amber to green when a fix is made and maintained. In one city, an amber cluster glows at the mouths of a flood canal. During dry months, hardly a bottle moves. In monsoon bursts, entire neighborhoods of plastic sprint oceanward. The Atlas's algorithm has a suggestion. Place modular booms at 3 staggered points and install a floating conveyor at the last bend before the estuary. The team consults the fishermen who know the canal better than any hydrologist, and they revise the placements by 20 meters because the eddy behind the public market can be stubborn. The installation is quick. Drop anchors, pin the booms, tie the conveyors to the pier's electricity, test the fish gates so fingerlings pass unharmed. The next storm comes. The conveyor hums. Debris rises like a confession and is fed into hoppers bound for a sorting center that feels less like a dump and more like a receiving dock for materials. Amber fades to green. At the periphery, in a coastal village, the atlas shows a thin thread of amber along a mangrove fringe. There is no place to put a conveyor here. There is only time and hands. The plan is different, but no less professional. A crew of 6 trained residents, paid on a schedule, outfitted with tide charts and puncture-proof gloves, wades at low water to lift plastic from roots and cradle nurseries. They log their bags by weight and type. The data travels the same route as the river city's conveyor counts. On the shared map, their green dot is the same size as the dot above the flood canal. This equivalence is not cosmetic, it is cultural. The work is equal when the outcome is protection. Rivers first, turning off the tap. Rivers account for a large share of plastic inputs to the sea, and they obey a simple equation: inflow minus capture equals outflow. But capture is not merely a device, it is a system. Begin upstream with prevention. Introduce deposit return programs that make every bottle a coin. Those programs are not glamorous, but they are resilient. For every missing truck, there is a person with a sack and a motivation. In places where sachets dominate, tiny packets of shampoo, detergent, fish sauce leakage is nearly guaranteed. So you redesign the system that forces sachets into being. You partner with neighborhood shops to install refill stations that dispense the same products into durable containers. The hunch that poor households will be punished by deposits is wrong when deposits are designed to be tiny, immediate, and refundable in the same alleyway where the sale happens. The pilot may require subsidy, the scale-up will not, because the cost of post-leakage cleanup is larger than the cost of pre-leakage dignity. Where capture devices are warranted, choose for hydrology and maintenance. Booms that snake across the current and funnel trash toward a collection point should be placed where the velocity is strong enough to push debris, but not so strong that anchors drag. Design fish passages that open at set intervals, and test them with cameras and local knowledge, adjusting timing to spawning seasons. Build redundancy. A second boom upstream so that if the first fails in a storm, the second catches. Budget for fouling. Everything that floats grows a beard. Account for the crew days needed to shave it. Equip the capture with intelligence. A camera pointed at the boom can count items by type and estimate mass with machine learning that finally deserves the phrase useful. The algorithm's confidence interval helps schedule pickups. Dispatch a barge when the upper bound crosses a threshold, not when a manager's schedule opens. In the rainy season, mount a turbidity sensor upstream. When silt surges, trash soon follows. The system knows and tells the crew, stand by, gloves ready, rain at 14. Ports, harbors, and working water. Commercial ports are both vulnerability and opportunity. They already run on schedules, safety, and equipment. Thread cleanup into that fabric. Install a line of surface skimmers along quay walls where eddies trap litter. The skimmers look like polite mouths. They sip, they clog, and because they clog, they must be someone's job. Write that into the port's operations manual. 73008 00 Empty skimmers A1, A8. Record mass. Photograph anomalies. An anomaly is a dead turtle, a drum of solvent, a bale of rope. Anomalies require escalation. Build a hotline that escalates beyond bureaucracy. The ocean's problems hate voicemail. Fishing harbors demand a different rhythm. There, the dominant waste is gear, lines, nets, floats, monofilament that tangles into birds' nests capable of strangling propellers and reefs. There is only one proven answer. Make it worth returning. Create a gear buyback program that pays by weight for derelict nets and ropes, and couple it with a discount on new gear when old gear is surrendered intact. Fit every net with a cheap, passive tag linked to a co-op's registry. If the net is found at sea, the co-op can be notified and a retrieval expedition made not to punish but to recover value and reduce loss. If the gear is lost in a storm, a small insurance payout replaces it. The point is not to moralize, it is to mathematize. The lowest cost path for a fisherman must be the path that leaves the ocean clear. Ghost fishing is an emergency with a slow accent. Traps and nets continue to kill for years. Fund divers. Equip them with lift bags and knives designed for line. Pay a bounty for each recovered trap. Train the divers to cut with minimal damage to living substrate. Build a ceremony into the program. When a community hauls a ghost net onto the dock, clap. Pride has a physics as measurable as current speed. Beaches, mangroves, and the rack line. Beach cleanups captured the cultural imagination because they offer a social cinematic act. People in bright shirts, bags, lining a boardwalk like sentries. And they work if they are not theater. The distinction is simple. Do they have a maintenance plan and a data plan? A theater cleanup is an annual event with a photo. A maintenance cleanup breaks the beach into sectors, assigns those sectors on a rotating schedule, and measures what is collected by type and mass. The data is not for shame, it is for design. If the rack line is rich in industrial pellet nurdles, the source is upstream in the supply chain. If the line is candy wrappers and cigarette filters, the source is local consumption, which calls for bins with lids and signage that a 7-year-old can parse. Mangroves are trickier. Their roots are meshes that filter life and litter with equal efficiency. Cleaning them requires choreography with the tide. At spring low tides, when the flats are bare, teams can move in a formation that mimics a harvest. 2 in front to lift the larger items, 2 behind to sift for smaller, 1 with a logbook, 1 with a cart to minimize trampling. The rule is simple. No route is broken on purpose. If it breaks, it is noted. The team owns that metric. Equip them with waders, not flip-flops. Pay them enough that the job is a profession with pride and return rates. If the mangrove is a nursery for fish, then the crew is a nursery for the town's future technicians. Their attention to detail will migrate into other trades. Wastewater and the invisible load. Not all pollution arrives as chunks. Much of it is shredded into filaments and dust before it ever sees the sea. Microfibers from laundry, crumb rubber from tires, a confetti of paints and adhesives from boats and buildings. You cannot ask a surface boom to catch a hair. You must stop it where it starts. Begin in the laundry room. Require that new washing machines be shipped with microfiber filters, and create a retrofit program for existing machines with discounts and simple installs. The filter must be easy to clean and hard to ignore. Test models. Publish performance. If a filter traps a jar's worth of fuzz each month, the family sees the ghost they were sending downhill, and habits change faster than an ordinance could. Move to the street. Tire wear dust is the ocean's invisible diet. Mitigate at 4 points. Tire chemistry, push for compounds that shed less. Vehicle weight, lighter vehicles shed less. Reward them. Road design, install capture slots at curbs that lead to removable, permeable cartridges, grit traps, dressed as furniture, and street sweeping increase frequency before rain, when dry deposited dust is poised to sprint. Sweeping is not romantic, but it is one of the highest leverage acts in the book. Write performance contracts that pay by kilogram of captured fine particulate verified at a transfer station, not by kilometers driven. At wastewater plants, adopt tertiary filtration where feasible, membranes, or biologically active filters that can strip microplastics before discharge. For small plants, add drum screens with mesh fine enough to matter but coarse enough to avoid constant blinding. Couple with polymer-free flocculants that do not add to the microplastic load. Measure, publish, adjust. Upstream in product design, you can sweep and skim forever. If the stream of new material remains foolish, the future is a treadmill. The pivot is design. Demand that packaging be monomaterial where possible so it can be recycled instead of downcycled into items with no second life. Ban combinations that fuse paper, plastic, and metal in inseparable marriages. Standardize neck rings, caps, and labels so automated sorting does not fail on technicalities. Design inks and adhesives that wash off at recycling line temperatures, not only in lab beakers. And always ask, can this be refill instead? In cities where refilling is designed with beauty, people do it not for virtue but for pleasure. Stainless dispensers, good lighting, a hint of theater as the container fills, these details matter. Textiles are a major microplastic source, and fashion is a carnival of avoidable harm. Encourage fibers with lower shed rates. Establish a voluntary, soon mandatory, shed index label akin to energy efficiency stickers on appliances. A garment with a lower shed index earns a tax break. A laundry with filter service earns a subsidy. An industry that prides itself on surface can be led by surface. Certification logos that carry social status among buyers who once cared only for season and cut. Finance and the logic of permanence. All of this costs money. But money is not a brick, it is a river. Build its course wisely. The highest performing programs have 3 traits: predictable funding, pay for performance mechanics, and local employment. Predictability comes from small levies on the sources of waste, a fraction of a cent per bottle, a fee on virgin resin, a surcharge on tires, that fund the capture and filtration systems that mitigate their products' externalities. Pay for performance ensures that contractors and city departments are rewarded for results, kilograms captured and responsibly processed, rather than effort alone, hours staffed, trucks dispatched. Local employment is the human heartbeat. A cleanup device that creates jobs is a device that earns allies, and allies defend budgets when politics turns. Introduce impact bonds where municipal appetite for upfront capital is thin. Investors fund the installation of river capture and street sweeping upgrades. They are repaid by the city over years as metrics are met. The risk is shared. The ocean reaps the certainty of work done now, not later. Processing and the fate of the captured. Once you collect debris, the story is only half told. Where does it go? Landfilling is sometimes the least bad option, especially for degraded mixed plastics. Incineration with energy recovery can be acceptable where emissions controls are strict and the alternative is leakage. But the moral hazard is real, so guardrails must be strong. Cap tonnages, prioritize diversion to recycling where feasible, and never build an incineration economy that demands feedstock to pay its debt. For recyclable streams, invest in regional sorting facilities that can handle coastal mixes. Ropes, nets, film, rigid plastics, foams. Nets are often nylon. They can be reborn into pellets with real market value if cleaned and shredded properly. Monofilament can be fused into product lines that wear their history proudly, sunglasses, frames, skate decks, without pretending that trinkets will save the sea. Film is hard. Contamination is its enemy. Explore pyrolysis with clear-eyed skepticism. It is not a miracle, but in some contexts, it can convert non-recyclable plastics into oil that, if used to displace virgin production under strict accounting, moves the ledger in the right direction. Do not chase hype. Chase verified net benefit. Law, policy, and the architecture of choice. Culture changes faster when law edits the stage on which choices are made. 3 policies stand out as multipliers: extended producer responsibility, EPR, right to refill, and stormwater standards. EPR shifts the cost of end-of-life management from the public purse to the producer that profits from the product. Done well, EPR funds collection and processing, incentivizes design improvements, and equalizes the playing field so that responsible companies are not punished for their effort. Right to refill is a legal permission slip that makes refill systems practical. Health codes updated to allow customers to bring clean containers. Packaging regulations that acknowledge refill as a legitimate, safe alternative. Procurement rules that let public buildings lead by installing refill points. Storm water standards are the quiet revolution. Require new developments to capture and treat a set percentage of runoff on site, with approved technologies that include bioretention basins, permeable pavements, and filter inserts. Retrofit existing drains on a schedule tied to maintenance budgets, not wish lists. The standard should be simple enough that a builder can predict compliance and strict enough that a city can predict improvement. Technology. Sorting signal from noise. Every decade declares a new miracle. Our job is to separate helpful from theatrical. Autonomous skimming drones, helpful where boat traffic is low, maintenance is assured, and battery logistics are mature. Massive ocean trawls that skim gyres, helpful only in narrow surface conditions and often harmful to Houston life. Used sparingly and never as an excuse to ignore rivers. Enzymes that eat plastic, promising in controlled settings, sorting centers, wastewater plants, not as ocean soups. Magnetic nanoparticles that bind microplastics, intriguing in laboratories, risky in ecosystems. Pursue with caution and clarity. The best technologies are the ones that disappear into maintenance routines, filters, booms, grit traps, sensors that fit into the daily habits of cities and crews, measuring success without illusion. If we are to claim progress, we must deserve it. Define 3 classes of metrics: flow, what enters; stock, what remains; and harm, what it does. Flow is measured by capture at booms, intake filters, and storm drains, as well as by standardized beach transects that count items after storms. Stock is measured by periodic trawl surveys for microplastics at set depths along fixed routes and by seafloor imagery in selected canyons. Harm is measured by sentinel species mussels assayed for microplastic load, seabirds monitored for ingestions and entanglements, coral observations for fishing line injuries. Choose a basket of indicators simple enough to communicate at a town hall and rigorous enough to survive an academic seminar. Publish them. When numbers go the wrong way, admit it. When they go the right way, do not attribute victory to the last device installed, attribute it to the system. Case studies, maps that became stories. In a delta city where 2 great rivers braid into a brown lace, the monsoon used to bring despair. After 3 years of coordinated work, deposit return kiosks in markets, staged booms with fish gates, and a new ordinance requiring construction sites to install silt and litter fences, the first storm of July produces a smaller plume. The atlas shows it. The near-shore waters are less turbid, the spectral signature of surface debris weaker. The fishers complain less about propeller snarls. The Port Authority's skimmers clog only twice that week, not 6 times. It is not a miracle, it is maintenance. On a volcanic island, the tourism board once airbrushed photos to erase bottle caps in the sand. Now, the board funds a permanent mangrove crew, a refill pavilion at the ferry dock that is as elegant as a gallery, and a gear buyback program that turned ghost nets into a resource. The dive shops sell bracelets made from rope reclaimed off reefs, but more importantly, they publish their monthly recovery data on a chalkboard. Visitors see the numbers, and the numbers decline. Pride shifts from trinkets to trend lines. In a temperate port, rain used to mean a slick of cigarette filters and foam along the marina. The city installed curbside grit traps disguised as planters, increased sweeping the day before forecast rain above a certain threshold, and fitted laundromats with subsidized microfiber filters. The marina now hosts a race to empty skimmers after storms. The winner's name is chalked beside the fuel dock. It is mildly ridiculous and entirely effective. The rack line is made mostly of kelp again. Equity. The ocean is not a luxury good. A trap of environmental work is to make it a luxury. The ocean does not care how much money you have, but the solutions often seem to. Avoid that by designing programs that reduce burden on the poorest. If single-use sachets are replaced by refill, make sure the refill is closer, faster, and no more expensive in time than the sachet was in money. If a deposit is required, let it be tiny and instantly refundable in the same shop that sells the goods. If a storm drain filter is installed on a street in a neighborhood already starved for services, hire there first. Let the maintenance job belong to someone who lives within walking distance. If a law must be enforced, enforce it where it is hardest and easiest alike. Selective enforcement breeds contempt, and contempt finds its way downstream. Culture. Making clean cool and boring. Cultures change with stories and with boredom. The story is simple. The ocean is a neighbor. You do not throw mess into a neighbor's yard. You fix your gutters so your yard's mess does not flood into theirs. You bring your neighbors soup when they are sick. The ocean has been sick with us. We owe soup. Boredom is the other engine. When filters and booms and schedules become as dull as streetlights, we have won. No one writes a ballad about a well-tuned grit trap, but entire cities function because of such dullness. The same can hold for ocean cleanliness. Civic pride will adopt it, quietly. A child will grow up thinking it normal that storm drains are checked before rain, that laundromats clean filters on Thursdays, that fishermen swipe a tag when they return old gear, that the trash wheel posts yesterday's haul alongside the baseball score. That child will be right. Education. The first data set, take a class to the river. Do not bring a lecture. Bring a sieve, a jar, and a map. Let the student sieve a gallon of water through a cloth and tip what remains into the jar. Let them hold up the jar and see the sheen of occasional confetti. Do not explain first. Ask, "What is this? Where did it come from?" Then walk to a street and point to a tire, a cigarette, a shirt in a window. The map shows the nearest storm drain that lacks an insert. The class petitions, not with drama, but with a form the city has made for this exact purpose. The insert appears a month later. The students go back to the river, sieve again, and count fewer specks. They have met cause and effect. They have met agency. That is the beginning of stewardship that outlives curriculum. Answering the question. We have traveled far from the first question, not to avoid it but to answer it with the fidelity it deserves. Can we fully clean the oceans? If fully clean means restore every cubic meter to a pre-industrial composition, erase every polymer that ever fragmented, and scrape from the abyss every derelict rope, then no. The physics and the ethics both say no. A clean that perfect would destroy what we intend to save. But if fully clean means this, stop the inputs until the flow is near zero. Remove what we can where it clusters and harms most. Design products and cities so that leakage becomes a historical footnote. Restore habitats so that nature's own filters thrive again, and keep the pressure steady across decades. Then the answer is yes, in the ways that matter. Yes, to a rack line that tells a better story each season. Yes, to mangroves that cradle fish instead of foam. Yes, to ports that hum without choking. Yes, to reefs free of tourniquets of line. Yes, To whales whose stomachs contain squid and not lighters? Yes, to a generation that finds it odd that their grandparents tolerated what they did. This, yes, is not a mood. It is a series of jobs. It is a set of laws. It is a map that glows amber and then greens. It is an accountant's ledger that finally includes the ocean as an entity that cannot be billed but can be served. It is the click of a storm drain insert sliding into place and the thud of a bag of ghost net hitting a dock. It is a laundromat humming with filters and a curbside planter that is secretly a machine. When future readers come to this book, perhaps sitting beside a child who wants to see dolphins and not debris, I want them to see clearly what we saw at the beginning, a horizon that looked innocent and was not. I want them to see, too, the tide that we learned to shape with our hands and our policies and our budgets. And I want them to laugh a little at our early theater, the viral videos, the miracle gadgets, and nod at the steadying routines that actually changed the picture. So here is the finish line disguised as a checklist. Rivers fitted with capture where capture works, fed by prevention where prevention bites. Ports and harbors with maintenance woven into their mornings. Fishery co-ops paid to return gear and praised when they do. Beaches and mangroves on schedules, with crews that can recite their sectors like poetry. Wastewater plants and laundries with filters that prove their existence by what they catch. Streets that act like kidneys before rain. Products that assume return. Laws that make the right thing cheaper than the wrong. Sensors that count without pretense. Data that speaks without boasting. A culture that finds all this pleasantly, blessedly boring. That is our fully. It is not a spell. It is a system. The ocean, famously unimpressed by declarations, will notice only results. It already speaks that language. The rising and falling of life, the coming and going of sargassum, the return of clarity to a bay after a long week of northerlies. When our work begins to rhyme with those rhythms, when the curve of harm bends down and stays there, when the child at the waterline finds more shells than shards, for 3 summers in a row, we will have earned the right to say something simple and true. We could not clean everything. We cleaned enough, and we did not stop. The last image is ordinary. Dawn on a coast where ferries cross and cranes turn. A harbor hand empties a skimmer into a bin whose paint is worn at the edges. He checks a gauge. He writes a number. He yawns. He watches 2 terns argue over a scrap of kelp that looks suspiciously like a ribbon but is only kelp. He smiles, just a little, and goes back to work. The ocean swallows the light like it always does. It looks innocent again, and this time, more often than not, it is telling the truth.